Hello, storygoers, and welcome back to another episode of Tales from the Cartridge, the video game storytelling podcast. I am one of your co-hosts, Eric Penrod.
And I'm your other co-host, Ryan Bauer.
Oh, Ryan, this weekend's flying in the worst way. I hate when weekends fly by. It literally is the worst. You get there, you get to Friday night, you're like, yes, it's time. It's time to unwind. And then Sunday night comes, and you're like, I haven't unwound yet. I haven't unwound yet.
I need more time. Yeah.
I need more time, please. I know that time is a construct or whatever,
right. Yeah.
but at the same time, I don't think it is because time still keeps flying by. I don't understand. So, I don't know. I don't get it. Anyway, Ryan, how are you, and what have you been playing?
I am doing all right. It has been just a wonderful time, as always. But I'm doing all right. Feeling a little tired, but that's okay. Just been playing lots of games, hanging out, surviving as best as I can. Friday, I got home from work, and I passed out at I had to go to bed because I had the worst headache. And I went to bed at 8 o'clock on Friday. So my sleep is all messed up because then I woke up at 4 a.m. on Saturday morning.
Oh.
And it's fine. We'll hopefully rein it back in for this next week. But other than that, I'm doing all right. I've been playing a lot of Horizon Forbidden West, which I'm enjoying a whole bunch, and then a little bit of Grounded, which I don't know if you remember this game. I've heard of this game, Eric.
Go ahead. Sorry.
It's on Game Pass. It's like a survival game where you're playing these teenagers who've been shrunken down.
Yes.
So it's like a survival game. I mean, think similar to Raft, but instead of being on a raft, you're in this backyard with these massive, forest of blades of grass, and you cut them down and you build a house out of it, and you get attacked by very scary spiders. It's just a fun little time. It's free on Game Pass. So we finished Nobody Saves the World, me and our friend Dave, and we're like, okay, let's download 4 things that are on Game Pass. Let's figure out what we're going to do next. And we both didn't want to jump into anything too wild because Horizon's out. Destiny I haven't even touched yet is out. So there's a lot. There's a lot going on. That's really all I've been playing. A whole bunch of Horizon and a little bit of Grounded.
Nice. Very cool.
Yeah. But yeah, how are you? And what have you been playing?
You and I are on the same page. I also passed out early on Friday, but my sleep schedule has always been off, so I think I just I've mastered the awful sleep schedule. So it's not. But yeah, I have the same thing. In terms of what I've been playing though, it actually is what we're covering today. It's the only game that I've played and I beat, so I can have this moment and talk about it. This is actually going to be our most. Hopefully, I don't know if this will make sense or not. This will be our most current. This episode will be the episode that is most recently closest to when this game came out. Does that make sense?
Quickest turnover.
Yeah, quickest turnover.
Yes. Episode.
Thank you.
Which is quite the feat.
Yeah, we haven't had a game that has been out so recently that we've covered. This is the first one. Right. So I hope we don't get any strikes or anything against us.
I don't think so. I don't think until you start making money. I don't think they do. I don't think I don't think you can be copyrighted until you're making money off of it. Or again, our likeness now, we are very good voice actors and you're an incredible writer. But if our likeness is too close to the game, they may have issue. But also it's a different medium, so I feel I'm maybe eventually down the line we'll have to put in all rights reserved to slow cap entertainment, whatever, but I don't think that just yet.
Yeah, we don't make money, so that's perfect.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're not making money off of it.
It feels counterproductive to say that.
Right. Yeah.
But before we jump into that, we just want to say that we hope you're doing well and that we hope that you enjoyed our last episode, which is our bedtime story of Pokemon Unite. It was actually our longest episode. Of a bedtime story.
Right.
So it came out better than I thought it would. I already assumed it was going to be perfect, so it's even more perfecter.
Extra perfect, yeah.
As well as we hope you enjoyed our last DLC all about love, and I think it was unhealthy relationships, right? Or bad relationships.
It was unhealthy. Yeah, it was a bit of a wild one. Things got a bit out of hand. It got a little rowdy.
I learned that octopi can't have human babies. Yeah. Did not know that.
Now you know.
And if you don't know what I'm talking about, you should go listen to it. It's one of our better DLCs. It's probably our best one.
Yeah, it was a good time. Yeah.
But we hope you're doing well, and we would love to hear your thoughts, feelings, and perspectives by sending them to us at our Gmail account. That was lame. at our email at talesinthecartridge@gmail.com. All of the E's are threes. You can also find us on Twitter and Instagram. DM us, comment on our posts, let us know what you think, and we will happily share those in our next episode. But today, we are breaking it down Kung Fu style as we jump into the world of Sifu. Newest game from the studio Slow Clap. It is awesome, but I'll get into that soon because my memories are very recent, so I won't be wrong, I hope.
Yeah.
But Ryan, you want to jump us through the background stuff and the influences?
Yeah, I'd love to. So for background influences, we have, as you said, developed and published by Slowcap, which are a Paris-based company, actually a bunch of old Ubisoft France folks who left Ubisoft and made their own company. So like their game before Sifu, which was Absolver, was like an open world kung fu game, like very Ubisoft looky game. This game came out, like you said, very recently, February 8th of 2022, within this month that we're recording this episode, which is buck wild.
That's crazy.
Directed by Jordan Leani and produced by Pierre Tarno. I'm sure there is an accent there that I'm not quite nailing.
It was great. No, it was good.
Thanks. Influences. I looked at some interviews between the developers and the producers of the game. And Eric, you are a connoisseur of the Kung Fu, may recognize far more of these references than I do. So if you do, or if you notice anything, just shout it out. The Raid, which I have not heard of. John Wick, which I've seen. Good. Oh, please go. The Raid.
I was gonna say I can take this part if you want me to.
Yeah, please. At least the movie section, because I know who Jackie Chan is, and they talk about that, but that's kind of the end of my Kung Fu understanding.
Yeah, so the game is based on a lot of movie influences. The Raid by Garrett Evans, John Wick by Chad Stahelski, Sha Po Lang by Wilson Yip, and Tom Yum Gong by Prasha Pinkal.
Nailed it. Yeah.
Something. Pinkal. I will say I've seen The Raid. And I love The Raid. If you love Kung Fu movies and you've not seen The Raid is very good because it's very realistic. It's about these cops who have to go into this building to get to, I forget, it's been a while since I've seen it, but they're going there for something, and they're climbing up the levels to get to the top, and they're fighting their way up, which actually happens a lot in Sifu, which is really cool. I'm protecting the pieces right now. It's a fantastic movie if you like those kinds of things. And of course, John Wick. Everyone loves John Wick. I mean, most people do. It's very good. Keanu Reeves, whatever. I haven't seen the other two, but maybe it's worth looking into. But other influences are Jackie Chan movies for the one versus multiple enemies style and the use of the environment, which again happens a lot in Sifu. It's like I'm saying that because I'm putting it's literally coming together in my mind right now, which is really cool. So Police Story with Jackie Chan, Dragons Forever by Sammo Hung, and Miracles, again, by Jackie Chan. Other influences include, but are not necessarily Kung Fu movies, but references we liked that influence the work and the story are Fearless by Rooney Yu, The Blade by Sue Hark, The Blade of the Immortal by Samurai. That's funny. It's spelled differently. And Kill Bill by Quentin Tarantino. So, games, obviously, like Ryan said, so Slow Clap is the developer, and they made the 2017 game Absolver, which again is an open world martial arts game. And I've always heard of it, but I actually never played it, so I probably should.
Yeah, I bet you really dig it.
I probably would. It's probably really good. And I know that so Ryan, you put this here, and you're very right. So this game is based off Pak Mei martial arts. It's sometimes known as Bak Mei, which is a very old form of Chinese kung fu. It's very cool. It's not really so much used in like MMA stuff, I don't think, but it's it's still practiced today. It's very relevant still. So I say it not super knowing, though I did look it up because I was very, very curious. I know that also Slow Clap did hire a master of Pak Mei to do a lot of the mocap mocap and kind of like made sure that everything that they were doing in the game in terms of style and kung fu and martial arts in the game was relevant to what it is and done well in terms of what Pak Mei martial arts represents. So anyway, done tripping over my words. Ryan, we're going to go into memories.
Yeah.
So do you have any, in this last month, have you potentially tried Sifu or seen or seen any of it. That's stupid.
Yeah. So no, I have not played it, but I've seen quite a bit on it, and then just had a conversation with you talking about it. I know that it is a martial arts game. I know that it is inspired by a lot of these things because of the trailers that I've seen and the stuff that I've seen on it. I know there's some kind of strange aging thing to it, which I think you kind of explained to me how it works, either when we were hanging out or in a previous episode. So I have like some insular, whatever that word is, knowledge of some of the game. I don't know narratively what's going on. My guess is it's like a revenge story because that feels very kung fu, but I no idea. So that's kind of the end of it. I know kind of the broad strokes, but nothing specific or specific to this game, really. So I'm excited to jump in and see what it's all about.
Yeah, I think this will be great because I think a lot of people also they're not super into kung fu fighty games like this, but this game has so much to offer, more so than just the gameplay, which I think is also fantastic. But I think the story is really cool and one that does not hold your hand, which is, I think, always great. You have to put the pieces together in a sense. I've been super jazzed about this game since it was first announced. I think at a state of play for PlayStation. I think is when it first was announced, and just the style and everything about it just gripped me instantly, and I've been psyched for it ever since. And I don't regret buying it or playing it. It was fantastic. It's a game where I had bought Sifu first. I think it came out first before Pokemon Legends Arceus. And I did not care about Pokemon Legends Arceus. I did. Don't get me wrong. I do. I'm going to play it. But I love Sifu so much that I did not even have a draw to Pokemon because I was so stuck on Sifu. Like, getting better, making sure I didn't age. Like, it'll make sense when I say it more if you don't know the game. But it's just such a great time. It really is. And pretty soon, I've heard that Solo Clap is going to introduce a easy mode into the game. So for people who maybe just not enjoy the challenge of the age progression system and all that stuff, which is totally cool. I think it's a game where the story is really good, and I think the story does teach you something. So if you hear this story and you really like it, I really push you to buy the game and play the easy mode when it's out, if that's more your style, because there are things I had to leave out of this script that really define what happens more on the game. You get the general context in this one, obviously, but as you play the game, you learn more things about each character as to why their motivations are that we might go through at the end of this whole thing. But it's just a lot of fun to learn, and it is a lot of fun to get good at the game. Like, it's very rewarding. It makes you feel awesome in like the best way. So I'm very excited about this game. Right, I'm ready to like bust some butt, kick some teeth in.
Yeah.
Slow clap.
I can tell. You're jazzed. You're ready to go. Yeah.
But I think without further ado, we should just jump right in.
Yeah, let's do it.
The rain fell hard as the figure approached the dojo's door. A single light lit the door to enter as the figure clad in black approached, the lightning crackling in the sky above him. His long black hair soaked from the storm surrounding him. As he approached the entrance, he lifted his leg and smashed the door in. A panicked student of the dojo, just inside the doorway, flinched in fear of the sight of the door being broken in. The figure, clad in black, approached the student and easily parried his moves while simultaneously pummeling him and smashed him against the nearby wall. The noise of the encounter caused all of the dojo students around the corner to stop and stare as the figure, clad in black, approached them. The students questioned who the figure was, as he only replied,
"Get out of my way."
Numerous martial artists attacked the figure as he took each one down with ease, each student falling to the lethal strikes from the figure clad in black. As each student lay defeated on the floor, the figure approached the back door and walked back out into the cold rain. Running up the cement stairs, the figure approached the next building's entrance as a defeated martial artist flew out of the door and rolled onto the ground. From inside the building, resting against the table, was another figure clad in black, holding a bow staff.
I thought you said they'd put up a fight. I'm barely breaking a sweat,
the bow staff wielding man said in a disappointing tone.
Don't be so arrogant.
the figure clad in black replied as he continued forward up a flight of stairs, out the back door leading again outside, and up another flight of cement stairs. The stairway was lit on either side from the flames of the lanterns resting as the figure made it to the top of the dojo and entered inside. More students stood before the figure as he easily defeated them. He moved into the next room where more students sat with one another as they looked to the noise made by the figure clad in black. They stared at him and immediately knew who he was.
Yang, how dare you set foot in here again?
The figure clad in black, known to them as Yang, did not flinch as he attacked those who he once considered friends. Each student fell to Yang's fist without mercy. He moved swiftly to the back door as he tried to find his target. Outside, Yang's run slowed to a walk as he approached another man dressed in black, sitting at a stone bench, the bodies of more students resting at his feet. In his hand was a machete.
Where is he?
Yang questioned the machete wielder. The man with the machete motioned with his head to the door closest to him. Yang sprinted to the door and entered inside to find an old man fighting against two other martial artists dressed in black. One wielding a 3-section staff with sharp knives on each end, while the other used a blade attached to a rope.
Stop,
Yang ordered, as the two backed away from the old man who had held his own against them. The old man was none other than the master of the dojo, known as the Sifu. He looked forward to the figure clad in black.
Yang, of course,
Sifu said with disdain in his voice. Yang moved forward, staring at his former master.
You've gotten slow, Sifu,
Yang said, as the bow staff and machete wielder entered behind him.
You know why I'm here, don't you? Just step aside,
Yang instructed. Sifu looked down to the ground and grimaced as he turned his back to Yang and his deadly accomplices.
You were a mistake. I should never have taught you.
Sifu walked towards a small box resting on the table of a small shrine, honoring the previous Sifu. He placed his hand on the box.
Now, you know too much.
Yang moved forward towards Sifu.
By returning tonight, you've given me a second chance.
Sifu turned to face his former pupil as lightning cracked outside.
This time, I will do what I must.
Both the former master and student began to fight one another. Though Sifu was older, with age came wisdom and experience, as he held his own against Yang. With a double open palm strike, Yang flew back through the double doors to the courtyard in the middle of the building. Rain showered onto Yang as he slowly stood back up and entered into a fighting stance.
When I look into your eyes, I see nothing but a frightened, angry child.
Sifu expressed to his former student. The two continued to fight against one another. Sifu was strong, but Yang continued to keep the pace. As Sifu's strikes became weaker, Yang's anger powered his fists. As the figure, clad in black, broke the master's stance, a swift and deadly punch landed against the Sifu's chest. His eyes wide as he stepped back, the master started to go limp as his body collapsed onto the cold, wet ground, his last breath leaving his mouth. As Sifu laid motionless on the ground, back in the room was a cabinet with a set of small compartment doors slightly open. Small eyes peered through one compartment door as the small boy inside tried to stay quiet. His brown eyes watched as Yang stepped over Sifu's body as he re-entered the room where his comrades waited. Yang walked over to the small box the Sifu had admired before their fight. He opened the box as a gold light shined out over his face. He closed it before saying,
"Show yourself."
The 12-year-old boy inside left his hiding spot and faced Yang. Dressed in his martial arts garb, he stared at the man who stole his father from him. Yang and his associates stood, staring at the boy as Yang approached and bent down. He stared intensely at the young boy before sighing in disappointment. Yang looked back to the man wielding the machete and nodded to him. The machete wielder walked forward and readied his blade as he brought it down across the boy's throat. Darkness enveloped the boy's sight as he lay motionless on the floor, a bright light under his hand. His eyes opened to his surprise as he looked at the pendant glowing in his hand. The pendant consisted of 5 small glowing Chinese medallions. The boy stood up and rubbed his neck in surprise. His body looked slightly older than it had before his life seemingly ended. He remembered his father and ran to him, but quickly stopped as his father's body lay wet and cold from the rain falling onto the ground. The boy could feel rage fill his heart as his hands shook in frustration and anger at his own weakness. The same weakness that couldn't help his father when he needed it most. The Sifu's son stood staring at his father's dead body as he swore revenge against Yang and his associates. All right, so that's our cold opening. Literally, it looks really cold in the game.
Yeah.
So you play. So when you start the game, you're playing as this person Yang. You're going through and you're destroying this dojo. You're
cool.
going, yeah. So you're doing all the moves that you do later on, right? And you know that Yang has this history with the Sifu, that he was once a student there. So like all of these moves are moves that you'll do later on because Sifu and the main character went to the same dojo together. But yeah, so Yang has these associates. They're all very deadly people. One has a bow staff, which is like just a normal staff, right? One has a 3-sectioned staff, which is like 3 shorter staffs connected by chains with knives at the end. It's really annoying, and I'll tell you why later. It's very frustrating. One has a rope and a knife attached to the end of it, so you kind of like swing it around and cut people. And the other one has a machete, which is less cool. And Yang doesn't use it. He uses his hands. He's a traditional martial artist, right? Not to say that the others aren't, but... So I'm curious, Ryan, what you think. Because when I first saw them, I was very curious. I thought I would be playing as the main character. It's what it kind of seemed as to me.
Yeah.
But you kind of learn that you're creating your own destruction that causes the intention in the game. What are your thoughts on Yang and his associates so far?
I think it's a really cool opening. It's a really cool opening as you're both from a game design perspective, and that you're like, here's all the things you'll be able to do someday. That's always really cool to like kind of make that carrot you're dangling for the player more interesting when you show them what you can do. But then from a narrative standpoint, you have this really interesting, you don't know what's going on and you're putting it together as you experience it. And then you end up kind of causing the problem that the protagonist is then going to have to deal with this for the rest of the game. So that's a really cool narrative framing that I really like. And then as far as Yang and his associates, they seem very spooky. If they can come in and beat this Sifu and beat everyone here like with no problem. I mean, it seemed like Yang himself was able to just kind of destroy everyone in this place. So they are very scary, and I definitely want to know why or what's going on here, and what it is, why they're back, why they're attacking this place, why they're killing the Sifu, and is it just for like some revenge, or is there like a reason behind it? I certainly want to know more.
Yeah. And there's definitely something else going on here, right? But like for now, we're very curious as to what's happening. And I think as you meet each character more, you'll know what's going on, or you're kind of assuming you kind of know what's the main reason behind this. So
yeah, and we also have like some of these like supernatural elements in there too, with like the kid, the what I'm assuming will be the protagonist like dying and then coming back older, which we know that's like a gameplay mechanic. So seeing that in the narrative is really interesting. So yeah, that we certainly know there is more than just a bunch of folks fighting going on, which again is a really good hook to start the game off with, start the story off with.
Yeah, because you notice that as he stands up, Misha puts in the script, as he stands up, he rubs his neck. Like, he's, like, very surprised that he's not, like, dead or bleeding. Like, his neck is fine. You see he's a little older physically. So as he holds this pendant in his hand. So he's kind of connecting the dots as to what's going on. So it's very interesting. I think you'll see more elements like that as you go through the story. I'm curious what your thoughts will be. It's definitely a surprise, but yeah. All right, well, let's keep going. 8 years passed as the boy grew older. He continued to train, alone, as the last student of his late father's dojo. Everything his father had taught him had been trained over and over again until it was ingrained in him. As the student trained, he pictured the people associated with his father's murder. Fajar, the botanist, the man responsible for cutting the student's throat as a child. He was a mute, and also involved in the local crime syndicate's creation of a purple flower used to make a popular drug, ruining numerous people's lives. Sean the fighter, the brute who expertly used the bow staff. He was the leader of an underground fighting ring and the owner of the nightclub used to hide it. Kuroki the artist, the woman who used the 3-section staff. She seemingly gave up her life of violence to pursue her art. She had recently opened up her own museum filled with her artwork. Jin Feng, the CEO, an older woman who became the CEO of a powerful philanthropic company. While she was missing one arm, she was still deadly and powerful in her own right. And last was Yang, the leader. The murderer of the student's father, Yang was now the head of a traditional healing facility that was also a martial arts dojo. The student had collected information on the 5 martial artists and displayed them on his bulletin board next to the window that overlooked the city. He knew he had to get his revenge within a 24-hour period. Once he took his first step towards revenge, he knew he could not stop, or else he could lose the chance to face everyone if they were to realize what he was doing too soon. After the student studied his board, he walked over to the shrine his father once stood at and prayed for strength to do what he needed to do. The morning sun shined down on the forgotten part of the city the student had entered. In the distance was the warehouse the student knew Fajar was making his drugs. The road leading to the warehouse had massive piles of junk, stopping him from easily getting to it. The student realized he would have to go through the neighboring buildings if he wanted any chance of reaching Fajar in the warehouse. He ran to the right side of the road and hopped over a fence, where he ran into thugs of the crime syndicate. Threatening the student, he quickly knocked them down and moved into the nearest building, traversing up the building's winding staircase, beating down anyone who got in his way. The student continued through neighboring buildings, taking down foes left and right as he finally made it to the warehouse. He walked into a large open room with tall standing metal planters filled with purple flowers. The student noticed his target at the end of the room. Fajar, the man who attacked the student with the large machete on that fateful night, stood at a planter filled with just soil. He placed his hand on the soil as he used a mysterious power to create multiple plant stems as they grew instantly. Fajar turned to face the student. He was clothed in rags, his body dirty from working with soil and plants constantly. The student knew the numerous purple flowers being used to create the purple drug was coming from Fajar. The murderer needed to pay for his deeds. The student settled into a stance as Fajar stepped forward and attacked, both trading blows at one another as the student leapt over a standing planter to get space away from Fajar to collect himself. Fajar didn't wait as he slid under the standing planter, attacking the student with a sliding kick. The student fell to the ground as Fajar took his fist and connected it to the back of the student's head, killing him. As his body laid motionless, The golden pendant hanging on the student's waist glowed as he stood back up. Fajar was confused, as he knew the young man couldn't have survived a blow like that. The student, who entered the fight with a clean-shaven face, now had slight hair stubble. His body had aged to 21 years old. With Fajar surprised, the student rushed the botanist, connecting several blows as he tried to finish the fight. Fajar parried and kicked the student back as he tumbled and smashed into a standing planter. The student looked up as Fajar removed his tattered clothing covering his torso and brought out his machete. He stared intensely at the student as bamboo began to sprout from the ground and covered the entire room in mere seconds. The student looked around in shock as everything around him was covered in bamboo, besides the center of the room, which was bare ground. He stood in the open space as he heard rustling come from the thick bamboo grove next to him. Suddenly, Fajar leapt out of the bamboo as he brought down his machete onto the student's head, killing him. Fajar grunted as he pitied the student, who was miraculously, somehow, standing up again. It was impossible, Fajar thought to himself, as the student looked slightly older again, his beard coming in even more. The student had aged again to 23 years old. He ran at Fajar and connected with a low kick, sending the mute to the ground. Fist rained down on Fajar as the student bent over and pummeled him. As Fajar got back onto his feet, he attacked again with his machete, irritated that his opponent wouldn't stay dead. Losing focus, the student parried the attacks, grabbing hold of Fajar's wrist, twisting his body around, positioning Fajar to where his own machete was resting against his bare neck. The botanist's eyes widened in fear of his death as the student held his life in the palm of his hands. With a quiet intensity, the student spoke. "I've spent 8 long years preparing for this." A sharp slice into bare flesh could be heard in the distance. All right, so that's a much more abbreviated version of the story. I was writing the story. I just want to be very honest. I was writing the story, and I think it's an experience you have to. It's hard to describe the whole experience. It's just a lot of fighting, which is great, but it becomes kind of nuanced the more you do it, the more you write about it. So I think it's more of an experience you want to see. There's a lot more to this level. Obviously, there's a lot of cool things that happen, but yeah. I think I want to keep more of the focus on the primary reason why he's doing this, which are the main antagonists. So. Again, I really implore any listener that hasn't played this game that is interested, I think you would enjoy it a lot. There's a lot of things you have to skip over, but it's a really good experience. All these levels are very unique and fun and different. But anyway, yes. So the student has gone to Fajar, who is the person who is a mute. He cannot talk. Used the machete that brought down onto the student's neck as a child, which then learned about this pendant's power, making him grow a little bit older every time he dies. And you see that more in the story as well. So now he's 23 years old. He's died twice. And I'm curious what your thoughts are, Ryan. Because for me, when I first played the game and Fajar brought out the plant that you first seen, I was like, that is really weird. I was not expecting that. And then the whole bamboo grove just grows. You're like, what is? He just leaps through and he tries to bring the machete down on you, and it's a whole thing. So I'm curious what your thoughts are about that.
I think it's really cool. I mean, you have these really cool set pieces that this is obviously setting up, and that kind of supernatural element that we were kind of teased at in that intro sequence is now kind of again reflected here in a really cool and interesting way, where now we have this, we're fighting in this bamboo forest, which is a very, at least in my mind, not seeing a lot of kung fu movies, this very traditional. You have these two martial artists fighting in this, bamboo forest, which is this really cool set piece and sets things up to be really cool. But it makes me curious about the rest of the these other 5, what abilities they have and why they have them. One of the things I noticed when you were kind of going through the 5 people is, it starts off with the most illegal and then gets very quickly not career paths I would expect for the people who did this murder, did this murder crime, which is really cool and interesting. And again, from a narrative standpoint, you have of course this guy is bad. He killed you and he's running drugs. of course we have to kill him. And even the next guy, well, he's kind of running an underground fighting ring. I'm sure there's something else he's doing. But then when you get to like, yeah, this person's an artist. This person does philanthropy, which is like giving money to people in need. This person, you know, runs a healing facility and owns a dojo. So like, again, you have this, you know, are we the bad guy as you start going farther and farther in this really cool and interesting way that I'm excited to see more. And then I also really liked how we have, you know, a mute character and a character who has, you know, only has one arm. So you have some of these disabilities added. They are not, you know, they don't have typical, my language. I understand the neurotypical language, but then I understand like ableism language, so I apologize if I'm not getting that correctly. But you have individuals with, you know, body disabilities. I don't know if that's still the correct word.
I get it.
Yeah, which again is really cool, and it does not slow them down. It does not make them less of incredible warriors, and I think that again is great to see in games. But yeah, a lot of really cool stuff going on here. I'm definitely really interested to see where it's going. And I understand why I had to cut out a lot of, you know, the fighting point. But I as somebody who hasn't seen it, I'm still able to follow, and it still is this like really cool fight sequence that I'm able to kind of envision even without those pieces. So I think it holds up really well. So I'm excited to see where it goes. It's very cool.
I'm glad you noticed that.
Yeah.
Actually, you make a very good point. I would like for you to stick on to that thought.
Okay.
That's a really interesting way. I'm so glad you picked that up because I actually didn't realize that too much later on.
Yeah.
When I was like, oh my God, I should have realized this. So like, it's very, that is a huge interesting part, right? Because like, you know, drugs, yeah. Underground fighting rink, that's not great. But I mean, like, And then it's like, artist at a museum, like, this feels weird. CEO for philanthropy, like it's just like it's hard to justify, even though you know they've done these horrible things. But then the question, why they do this horrible
right?
thing?
It makes them more complex and interesting characters because they're not just bad people, right? They're not just, at least like from knowing this information. And again, I don't know if you get all this information at the onset. Maybe you do. But like these aren't just like horrible people because the things they're doing are in some ways like making the world a better place and like helping make people feel better. At least first two, no. And I think it's really smart to set that up that way because then you can feel like empowered and like I'm doing the right thing. And then like midway you start to question, which is just a really good narrative framing. So I'm excited to see where it goes from there.
Yeah, I don't want to say anymore. We should just continue with the story and see where it goes.
I'm excited to see where it goes.
The afternoon had come as the student peered out, admiring the view of the city from his dojo. After taking a deep breath, he stood and made his way inside to his bulletin board. Next was Sean, the fighter, a brute of a man who ran an underground fight ring in disguise as a nightclub known as The Club. The student knew waiting too long would be a poor choice, and that going to confront Sean before the club was filled with people would not be helpful. The student closed his eyes and collected himself. 1 down, 4 to go. Sometime later, the student walked down the dirty alley to the club as he passed a man standing by himself.
Forget about it. You're not on the list. You're not getting inside.
The stranger advised the student. The stranger heard the man's advice but did not heed it as he approached the club's bouncer.
Private party. Come back tomorrow.
The bouncer said with grit in his voice just before the student knocked him down to the ground and thrashed him into submission. The student entered into the club as he fought his way through several normal-looking partiers trained in the ways of martial arts. Music beat throughout the massive speakers throughout the club as the student defeated each opponent until he made it to a dark room with an individual guarding a door to the other side. This individual explained that ahead was the burning trials and asked if the student was ready to face it. "I'm ready," the student said as he pushed the doors open and entered inside. It was dark until the fires began to burn down the long hallway the student stood in. At the very end of the hall, a looming figure walked away holding a black bow staff. Sean, the student thought, as he dashed forward to face him. But before he could reach Sean, the doors closed behind the fighter and locked. As the student felt irritation bubble up from inside of him, On the second-story balcony above him, a woman spoke.
"Step forward. You're about to be tested,"
she said as the 4 doors to the student's left and right opened and opponents rushed out. He fought against them all as they attacked together with sturdy bamboo poles and metal pipes, beating the student into submission. As they celebrated, the student rose again, his face looking slightly older and with a more prominent facial hair stubble. He was now 29 years old. Picking up a metal pipe off by his foot, the student attacked his opponents, beating them down as they lay motionless on the ground. He continued forward, facing more of Sean's pupils until he made it to the man himself. As the student opened the doors to Sean's chambers, one of his pupils sat before Sean, who rested on his own throne. Sean's chamber looked of that of a grand hall in a dojo. The pupil bowed before Sean and offered his arms to him. Sean sat in his throne, his body covered in body wrappings as he smoked a cigarette before he leaned forward and grabbed his pupil's arms, burning them deeply. The pupil cried out in pain as Sean let him go and told him to leave. The student watched as Sean stood from his throne and walked down to face his challenger.
I recognize that uniform. It represents a school for the weak and feeble,
Sean judgmentally said as he readied himself with bow staff in hand. The student rushed to the side of the room and picked up one of the many bow staff resting against the wall. Sean closed the gap quickly as the two fought one another. The student realized immediately that Sean was much better with the bow staff than he was. He was so proficient that it was basically an extension of his own body. It was hard to keep up as the student tried desperately to block Sean's attacks. With a sweep of his bow staff, Sean knocked the student to the ground as he chuckled. Knowing that it was pointless to try to be better with it, the student abandoned his bow staff and approached Sean, parrying his attacks. The student was beginning to get the upper hand, which enraged his opponent. As the student tried to go in for the kill, Sean pushed the student back. Taking one more breath of his cigarette, he dropped it to the floor just before smashing the lit tobacco with his bow staff. A flash blinded the student as he opened his eyes to the chamber, enveloped in charred wood floor and ceiling, as if it had been burning for hours. Flames scattered throughout the room. The student looked to Sean, whose bandages burned off of his body. His bow staff burned with fire at both ends.
You're almost as good as Yang. I thought he was unchallenged in that old bastard school. Who are you?
He questioned. A ghost from your past, here to put an end to this sideshow, the student said with disdain in his voice.
You picked the wrong person to haunt,
Sean said confidently as he rushed the student. The flames on Sean's bow staff burned intensely as he attacked. The student could barely dodge in time, barely escaping death. Sean twisted and spun, his bow staff looking for blood. Not reacting in time, Sean swept the student's foot, who dodged in time, but not quick enough as the bow staff came upward and under his chin. The student flew onto his back and laid there. A disgusting smile covered Sean's face as he turned to walk away. He stopped, however, as he turned, perplexed, to find the student standing again. His facial hair, now considered a beard, grew as more gray hairs began to show on his head. He was now 33 years old. Sean was caught off guard at his opponent as the student began to attack fiercely. Sean parried, attacking his opponent, who had learned his moves with the bow staff. The student parried and dodged all of Sean's attacks until a quick uppercut helped jar Sean enough to where the student stole the flaming bow staff away. With a few strikes, Sean laid on the ground, looking up to the student holding his flaming staff. Bringing the bow staff over his head, the student brought it downward with all of his might onto Sean. All right, so 2 people are dead very quickly. It happens very fast. This all happens within 1 day.
Yeah.
So like it's really fast paced. You kind of see every time you pick a new stage, the environment changes in terms of like where the light is, right? The sun's like shining, or it's going down, or it's dark out. So you kind of see the different times of day. So they're going through this club. It's a normal club until it's not all of a sudden. And then it's just like this underground dojo ring. People are fighting in cages, and like you go through, and like it's like this martial arts dojo that goes to this burning trial, and that's what this is. This guy gets burned on his forearms. It's a dedication to Sean. Like you've been through this trial. You're one of his like higher up pupils. Like you're dedicating yourself to him. But as we see here, the student gets the upper hand and ends up killing him with his own bow staff. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. I feel like his power is very strange because it's just very fiery, obviously, but not so like very obvious in a sense too. Like he's not shooting flames; it's just very hot. Like he just charged things very well. Which I thought was a little strange, but I'm glad he didn't shoot fire and stuff. I thought that'd be a little too much.
Yeah.
So I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I mean, I think with his power, just like the previous individual, it again. There is a mechanical, like there is, I'm assuming some kind of reason, but it is just creating these really cool settings and set pieces for you to have these fights in. Like this flaming dojo is such a cool idea of a place to be fighting, and he seems to like have dedicated himself to flame in some way, in some strange ratio with this individual who's growing things and this individual who is playing around with fire. So we have some like elemental stuff going on that's really cool. I mean, Sean, so far of these 5 individuals, seems to be the one that like is kind of the biggest goober, the biggest dick. But again, the previous person couldn't speak, so like because of that, there was like obviously we didn't get to hear him like talking back or like saying that's all you got and like that type of thing. So there's an intensity to that, or that's more interesting, which makes them just very different characters. Yeah. I mean, Sean seems to be like it seems like the previous individual was running some kind of drug ring. Sean seems to be like creating his own like fighting, his own dojo, his own dedicated fighting group, which is really interesting.
Yeah. He's very brutish, very like just antagonistic, right? Mm-hmm. Like it's very interesting. Someone it's hard to connect with. It seems like, and again, those two are total opposites of the next 3 are going to run into, right? You see more of that difference too, I think. But all the while, like, at least for me, as I continue on, like past this point, like I was, I go back and I'm like, why be this way? Why do all these things? But it'll be interesting once you get to that point, I think. But yeah, I know Sean's cool. And actually, it's really interesting. So there's an article that came out recently, based off player data, that this stage, the second stage of the game, was actually the hardest one for people to get through.
Interesting.
Is a hard stage. It beat me several times. It's just so long and so hard. Like you just get bombarded all the time, and then it's funny because you'll get bombarded and it's really hard, and you'll face that really hard like one opponent, and it's just incredibly hard. So like it's so constantly challenging. Like I think I first beat it at like age 50 or something like that, or now I can beat it at age 20. I don't have to die, but like it's such a huge difference. It's very interesting. That's very cool. It's really cool.
And it seems and maybe this is just your writing, but it seems almost every time that he dies and comes back, he either is stronger or more knowledgeable, or he has the upper hand. Is that something that is true? Like, is that something that as you're older, you're better?
Kind of. So as you get older, no, you're right. Yeah. So as you get older, your health goes down more. You become more frail, but you do become more powerful.
Oh, very cool.
You become stronger.
Yeah, that's very cool.
And so I try to weave that into the story, but at the same time too. And this is less so of the game as more just the player. But as you die, like you're paying attention to the moves, right? To get used to when to dodge, when to parry. So you are becoming smarter. And I will say for the next stage we're gonna cover, I died at age 70 the first time I beat it. Or the first time I played it, I could not beat it. Then as you play more and more, you get to the point where you are learning the moves and getting smarter. Yeah. So the idea is that the student is paying attention to that. So every time he dies, he learns a little bit more, and he's able to kind of go against. He has that second chance, so to speak, but just multiple second chances.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that is like this is a newer game. One of the things that we can see in this newer game is so closely like the mechanics and the narrative line up, in a way that is really cool and interesting, where like you as a player get smarter, the character gets smarter and fights better. And you're aging, so there's this like really good synchronicity that I think in older games just it didn't exist in the same way, where the mechanics so closely, fully became part of the narrative, where the mechanics and the narrative were so intertwined in such a really cool way that this game is doing a great job of.
Yeah, I feel like we see. I think you're so right. I think that games have done so much a better job weaving that element into gameplay-esque thing. I think it's done so well now, and I think Sifu is a great example of that. And I'm sure there's many others who I can't literally think off the top of my head, but there definitely are. Compared to like in the 90s or 80s or whatever. But
you had firepower, or you just got older, and there was no discussion about it. This is a video game. That's how it works. Where now there's this like, really interesting like narrative reason and mechanics in line with that in a really cool way.
Yeah. I mean, we even see the opposite of that in newer games, too. Like, I would even say, though it's a fantastic game, Moonlighter kind of goes against that narrative, right? Because, like, it's like, people die in these chambers all the time, and then when you lose, you just get kicked out. And it's like, that doesn't make any sense. Why aren't you dying? So it kind of goes against that idea. Which is fine, because that's not the point of the game, but still, it kind of takes you out of it. Whereas Sifu does a great job. And I wish I incorporated more of these, but as sometimes when you die and stand back up, the opponents be like, what are you, like, this is weird, like, what, how are you doing this, like, it's like what the heck is happening, like, they literally get freaked out when you stand back up because you should be dead, and you technically did die. So it's
very cool.
and as you die too, like, you get points, the more your combos, like, you get better combos, stuff like that, so you get more points, and you can invest in different skills, so technically you do become like stronger in a sense, but like it's not like it doesn't flow with the story, you know what I mean? So yeah
very cool.
So next we're on to our third target, which I think is a very interesting one. Literally, though, I hate this boss so much for so many reasons, and I will get to it later. The sun was beginning to set as the student trained in his dojo. He needed to cool down after such a heated fight. He walked inside his home and looked at his bulletin board. Next on his list was the artist Kuroki, a Japanese native exiled to China for unknown reasons. She had been there the night Sifu died. Though she was trained in the ways of martial arts, she seemingly did not fight anymore and opened her own art museum, filled with her own pieces. Though it may be true, the student had every intention of ridding the world of her as he set off for her museum. As the student entered into the museum, he noticed the massive waterfall in the middle of the main lobby. Security was already approaching him, telling him that he needed to leave the museum for his own good. One held a metal bat, while the other a Japanese short katana. Dodging their attacks, the student quickly put them down and grabbed the katana as he began to move through each exhibit. As he went through each one, the student noticed more and more of Kuroki's artwork, each one an expression of her soul and perspective on the world. As the student made it to the top of the museum, he ran around the walkway as a dangling work of art hanging in the main entrance began to form into the shape of Kuroki. The waterfall was perfectly in the center of Kuroki's artwork as the flowing water split, as if beckoning the student to enter. The student looked forward, confused, as no path was present for him to walk on to the waterfall. Taking a chance, he stepped over the ledge as an invisible walkway led him to the part in the waterfall. He entered into a room with perpetual rain as Kuroki's martial artists attacked the student. He fought them off, soaked to the bone from the rain. He followed through the last exhibit as he came to a room that looked as if it was outside during the winter. A small stream of water ran by the student's feet as he walked through the snow to find Kuroki, who was kneeling underneath a full moon. In her hands was a wooden doll that she had carved with several others scattered around her. Kuroki wore a pure white kimono with white makeup covering her face. She brushed off the doll that she had just finished carving as she spoke to the student. I do not want to fight you. That feeling of vengeance, it will not cease here. The student stood, his resolve ready to fight Kuroki and get his revenge, as he said nothing back to her. I speak from experience, Kuroki said softly as she twisted the wooden doll's head from its body. Now leave or be forced to leave, she said as she prepared her 3-section staff. Kuroki swung her staff at the student. The deadly weapon was one in which the sections of the wood were connected by a chain. Each end of the staff had a deadly blade attached to it. Kuroki spun and swung the staff with expert precision as she sliced the student on several places on his body. Blood dripped from his open wounds as the student dodged the blades and attacked when Kuroki left herself open. Her attacks were like artwork as she spun majestically and dangerously. With a slice on the calf, the student couldn't help but bend down to hold his wound as Kuroki spun her blade to the side of his head, making his body go limp. Kuroki stared at the man as emotions swelled inside of her. Confusion and surprise as the student stood back up, looking older, still, as he was now 36 years old. Kuroki questioned if the student had defeated death itself for him to stand again as he ran at her. He grabbed and threw her against a nearby rock as he sent several strikes against her, causing immense damage. With her posture broken, the student went to strike, but not before Kuroki headbutted him and jumped backwards. She dropped her staff as the color of her white kimono shifted to black. Black bled from around her eyes as it dripped down and showed prominently over her white makeup. A disturbing smile went across her face as she held the kunai knife up. The area shifted quickly into a world of infinite rain as swaying waves of water encircled the area around the two. Kuroki ran at the student, kunai in both hands, as she criticized him. I know 100 ways to kill you. You should have run when she gave you the chance. She jumped back and threw kunai at the student, who barely dodged them as she prepared herself. A gleam of light off her kunai signaled her dash as she attacked at super speed, plunging the kunai into his chest. He couldn't believe how fast she had went as he fell to his knees. She stepped back and watched, not surprised as he stood back up. The student was now 40 years old, his beard thick, grays more numerous, and wrinkles prominent. Kuroki jumped back again, sending out more knives that the student was able to dodge. She prepared again to dash at her opponent to keep killing him however many times it would take. But she wouldn't get another chance as she sped forward at the student, who was able to dodge her attack, having gotten used to her speed. He grabbed her arm, twisted her body around, and forced her own knife into her chest. Kuroki stood back in shock as her blood began to leave her body. The world of rain disappeared as the snow replaced it again. Her black kimono turned white as her blood stained it red. Kuroki fell back onto the snowy ground as the snow began to be stained with blood. All right, so that is the next one. That's number 3. And I'm curious what your thoughts are, Ryan, because again, you were killing it with these observations. Your perspective is spot on. She's saying, "I don't want to do this." Like, revenge is not the answer, right? I understand where you're coming from. Revenge isn't the answer. Like, you shouldn't do this, right? Yeah. She's trying actively to stop this from happening. Whereas, Fajar and Sean were like, "Bring it," they didn't care. So they were all about it. So I'm curious what your thoughts are on this. And you see it too. I wish I could, if I had more time in the day, if this is our full-time job, I would be describing these works of art better.
Yeah, they really do. Imagine.
Yeah, and they're really cool. Like, I think you could really see them in a work of art or in an art museum. Like, if I really saw these things, it would be amazing. It'd be so cool. But you really do get a side of her. You could just kind of know her better when you see her artwork. It's really interesting in that regard. But I'm very curious what your thoughts are. And if you caught something very, very interesting in what she said during the fight.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. I was actually, as you were reading, I like glanced at the question. I was like, what did she say? But overall, I think this is, again, you have these like really cool set pieces, like this museum with all this art, and then you get this like forest in the snow with a babbling brook. These really intense, really cool set pieces where you're having these fights. And then you have this crazy shift where she kind of goes from this kind of white. Traditional like Japanese white powdered face, white makeup, and then it goes kind of very creepy and black. And there's that shift where then she's like very, very fast. I don't know if I picked up on anything super specific. There is certainly a change where she goes from like, we don't have to do this to like leave or be forced to, and then they're fighting. She seems like the least surprised that you came back compared to the others, but again, that could just be to the writing. I don't know. I don't think I've cracked it yet.
Can I point it out to you? Is that okay?
Yeah, please do.
And this really, I'll explain this more. It doesn't become, just because of how the story is, like, it's more of an experience that you get when you play the game.
Yeah.
So I'll explain it more later after we're done with the story. But she says, I know 100 ways to kill you. After she's changed, right? She's kind of gone from this like very peaceful, I don't want to do this person, to this like, I will kill you.
Yeah.
You are going to regret this person. So after she changes, right, all the colors on her change, right? Everything that was black turns to white and vice versa. And she goes, I know 100 ways to kill you. You should have run when she gave you the chance.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So it's almost like there's multiple individuals, right? Like there's the her who you first met, and then there's this person who takes over. Interesting.
Which like they're so different, which is the most interesting part, because like in the game, at least for me, and I feel like I cannot be the only one because it is so hard. Her weapon is such a nuisance. It is the worst thing ever to fight against in that game. Sean's bow staff and Fajar's machete were nothing compared to this 3-section staff, which just wrecks you. It wrecks you. Like, you have to dodge it or parry it, but it's just, if you don't get it in time, it hurts you so bad. Like 2 hits and you're dead. It is the most frustrating boss fight, besides another one later on. And what's so interesting is like, so each fight has a 2-step process, right? You get to the first part, you break their structure, their posture, and then you go into the second phase. For Kuroki, what's so interesting is that this first phase is, for me at least, was way harder than the second one. The second one being the knives and her super fast. Like, that one is so easy because it's just all very fluid. It's very easy. But the first part is the hardest part. But now that we're talking about it, and now we're kind of like deciphering the fact that these are kind of 2 different people in a sense, it makes sense why their fighting styles are so different.
Yeah.
And why one might be so much harder than the other one, compared to one person who just shifts and gets harder that way. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
But I'll explain that more at the end, so it makes more sense for those who don't ever plan on playing this. They want more context. So yeah.
Right.
But I think that Kuroki's my favorite so far.
Okay.
She's very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, she certainly seems to be the most complex, as far as she's like, when you meet her, she says, like, you don't have to do this. I've gone down this path. You're not going to feel any better. After you kill me, this isn't going to end, which again is just from like very interesting and kind of jarring. For us as a player, it didn't seem to super phase the character, the student, but us as a player, again, it adds that doubt to what we're doing. As we've kind of come into this museum and just started murdering people in this museum. Now, it seems like some of them were fighters, but very different than, breaking up an underground fighting ring or going into a warehouse full of people who are creating a drug that is hurting other people, that are causing people to have a bad time. Which, again, then moving forward, we're moving into this, which we're going to get into, the CEO, who like runs a company that like gives money to charitable people, like charitable things, like is trying to make the world a better place. And how do you parse that? That's really interesting. I'm excited to see where it goes.
And I should say, for context, I totally forgot about this till just now because of you, Ryan. You jogged my memory. Thank you.
Yeah.
Is that you're right? So it's so different. The enemies you fight are so different because, in a sense, because a lot of them are bodyguards, and they're like, Lady Kuroki does not want to see you. She does not want to fight you. You need to turn back. You kind of like going through all those bodyguards, or you realize that they're from Sean's personal army, that he stationed people at the museum.
Yeah.
to help fight. So they're either from Sean's personal little army that he's building, or they're bodyguards that Kuroki's hired. So that is
interesting. So there's still like a relationship there between these 5, even though they've all gone their separate ways. There is still some type of connection. Interesting. That's very cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's funny. So like as you play the game, you get more information that you'll put on your bulletin board that you're collecting for yourself, and you notice that some people from Sean's personal army are there. So it's a good. I wish I'd put that in there. I didn't even think about it, but it was a good little context thing to know. So yeah.
Interesting.
All right, on to the 4th one. The student, back at his dojo, sat at his table silently drinking tea. 3 had fallen, 2 still lived. He stood up and walked to his bulletin board as he put on his jacket that went along with his martial arts clothing. Next on his list was the CEO, Jin Fang, an older woman with one arm who was just as deadly if she had both. She had become a powerful and wealthy CEO of her own company since the death of the student's father 8 years ago. Night enveloped the world as the student entered into Jin Fang's company's building. Security stood and watched as he entered in, but they did nothing. An employee at the main lobby's desk instructed the student to go into the elevator behind her to meet with Jin Fang as she was waiting for him. As he rode the elevator up, he wondered if it would be this easy to get to her and to have his revenge. As he made it to the top, he exited the elevator as he saw her sitting at her desk down a long hall.
Don't be shy. Come closer so I can get a better look at you,
she said, her bodyguards on either side of her.
Look at your face. Not even a scar. Your family is certainly full of mysteries. I am certain Yang would be thrilled to see you again. Unfortunately, I don't think you'll have that opportunity.
Jin Fang took a small bell that rested on her desk and rang it as a shock wave engulfed the room. She and her bodyguards disappeared, leaving the student alone with more of Jin Fang's henchmen running at him from down the hall from which he came. After disposing of them, the student searched throughout the CEO's building, looking for her and taking down more of her deadly employees. Jumping onto the top of an elevator, more employees fought the student as the elevator sped faster and faster down, leading him lower into the earth. The student realized that he had been entered into a massive pit, with different corridors and caverns built into the earth, leading him further and further down. As the student entered a room, one of Jin Fang's bodyguards stood and remarked at the selfishness of a group known as the Guardians, with one of the members being the student's father. She insulted the Guardians for keeping what belonged to the people. She stared at drawings of the 4 members of the Guardians, one being the Sifu, on the wall in front of her, who had all been X'd out with red paint. The 2 fought as more shock waves rang out from further below the pit. The student finished off Jin Fang's bodyguards, but not without dying and growing to the age of 45 years old. He got to the end of the rocky path the pit provided and knew he had to jump down. The black abyss engulfed him as he finally landed on solid ground.
For whom the bell tolls. You want revenge and to restore that which was, but that's suffering. It was for something. Yours, mine, even Yang's.
A golden light bloomed in front of the student as he noticed the massive golden bell looming overhead. In front of him was Jin Fang with her weapon, a golden chain with a solid glowing golden bell at the end of it.
We did something for the people. We shared. You want to erase it all?
Jin Fang jumped down from her perch to confront the student, her bell smacking the ground and ringing out.
The bell tolls for you, the Guardian's legacy. Now, accept your sentence.
Jin Fang was extremely skilled, swinging her chained bell with ease. The student dodged high and low, trying to stay out of the reach of the bell. He knew he had to get closer somehow. Dodging as he ran up to her, the student landed multiple punches before she kicked her bell forward and knocked him back. The bell was sturdy and heavy. The blow knocked the air out of the student as he stumbled back to his feet. Parrying more of her attacks, the student low-kicked Jin Fang to the ground and punched her while she was down. He picked her up and tried to take the bell, but not before she kicked him away. She took her weapon and smashed it on the ground, creating a shockwave, causing the massive golden bell to dislodge from above and smashed into the ground which they fought on. The student and Jin Fang's platform began to free fall into the earth. Deeper and deeper they traveled as they continued to fight one another. Jin Fang threw her bell and wrapped it around the student's wrist. She pulled him in and kicked with all of her might in the same spot the bell had hit the student before, the already massive injury becoming deadly as the student fell to the ground. His hair and beard were now entirely gray as the 50-year-old stood back up to Jin Fang's surprise. They continued to fight as Jin Fang was frustrated fighting her opponent. She kicked her bell forward as the student was able to grab the chain attached, rushed forward, and looped it around Jin Fang's neck as he held both ends of the chain in his hands. Jin Fang, desperate to stop him, could not, as he pulled the chain tighter and bent forward. Jin Fang's body grew limp. So this one's weird, right? Like you're climbing up the CEO tower, right? You're coming up this or the company building, right? You're looking for her. All the while you get these like weird shockwaves that kind of go out, and like they kick up dust or they'll kind of shoot things around a little bit. It's very weird, right? And then you realize as you're on this elevator fighting that it's taking you down. So you're not actually going up top to fight her like you would think.
Very
you're actually
weird.
going down to the earth, right? She kind of represents more of an earth tone, which if you're kind of noticing, like, so Fajar was nature, was plants, right, greenery. Shan was fire. Kuroki was water, and now Jin Fang is more earth, right? It's more, at least that's what I'm taking as. Maybe it's more like air. I don't think so. I think it's more earth, right? You're deep in the earth. You're fighting her there, and so it's weird because like in the second phase of it, she smashes her golden bell against the ground, which causes this other massive golden bell that's above you to fall onto your platform. So you're really just free falling deeper and deeper into the earth. It's not really explained how he gets back up, like where they're going, why is it taking so long. It's a very weird context. But again, it could just be that magical world they keep entering into, so to speak, you know? So
right.
This one's like one of the weirder ones for me. Like it's very strange. Like Kuroki's was a little weird too, right? You go to this random like outdoorsy place, but you're still inside this building, this museum. It makes no sense, but like it's still very interesting. While it makes no sense, the set pieces are very interesting and fun.
Yeah.
I don't know if you agree. I'm talking a lot. Ryan, what are your thoughts on this section?
Certainly, it's like getting more and more abstract as we're kind of moving through the experiences. Like we were fighting in a bamboo forest, we're fighting in like a building burning down. We were fighting in this like snowy mountain that then turned to rain, and now we're fighting in like this like strange magical place where we're then free falling and just going deeper into the earth than you could feasibly go in this really weird and interesting way. I mean, certainly, Jin Fang seems to either know more or be sharing more than the others for whatever reason. And she even talks about like we gave something back to the people, or we shared it to the people, that the student is trying to take away, which I think is alluding to why they killed Sifu in the first place was to get whatever this was, either these magical powers or this wealth or this something that's really interesting. So yeah, this is by far been the most abstract. I'm wondering if it's going to get more abstract as we do this last fight, or if it's going to become a little more grounded, or where we're going to land. But it's very interesting. And we also had a moment like similar to the last fight where she wanted to talk to you first. She wanted to like had you come up and speak with her before they just started fighting, because either she's curious or wants to know more. Or there's something else going on here, but she seems to recognize you in a way that the others didn't. So Jin Fang seems to know more, either because she was closer to Yang or just because she's older and maybe knew more of what was going on. But yeah, this is a very interesting one. Very, very weird one, but very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
she's kind of in the middle between like Sean and Kuroki, right? Like Sean
Yeah.
just wanted to fight, Kuroki just wanted to talk, and Jin Fang's like, I'll talk to you, but I still plan on killing you.
Yeah,
Like she
exactly.
didn't give you the chance to see Yang. So like she's right in the middle there, which is very interesting.
Yeah, she wanted to talk to you for her benefit. She wanted to get some information
Yeah.
out of you and then kill you. Versus Kurochi was like, "Hey, don't do this," which is really interesting.
What's fun is too is like again the level design is so good in this game, which is a huge reason why you should play it. But
Yeah.
like as you're going through this building, like you're seeing pictures of her like holding babies, and it's like all this philanthropy that she's doing and helping the world, and like she's so powerful and wealthy and great, and so she's really painted as this amazing person in this. And I mean, it's her company, so like of course you have to put those up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Where really she has like and so. There's actually a lot more context too that we'll get into later. Not so much in the story as like we'll talk about it though. Just for if you're interested in the background stuff, is like this underground place, this pit, right, where this bodyguard is standing and looking at these images of these old kung fu masters who are now dead that were killed by Yang and his associates, right? One being a Sifu. These people known as the Guardians. Like this whole thing being there is for a reason, but that comes later on. That's just more just like exposition, like you learn, naturally through the game.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, so 4 are dead, right? The 4 associates of Yang are dead, and last but not least is the former pupil of the Sifu, Yang himself.
Right.
So, yeah. Anything else you want to say before we move on, right?
No, I'm really curious to see where it goes, and I will say, and you can feel free to cut this, Eric, if you want. The fighting feels so dramatic in the way it's written that it is very gripping. So you did a really good job with that.
Oh, like they really do a great job creating that sense. Yeah. Right. Like they do a fantastic job at that. Yeah. So I hope I did a good job mixing it up and not making it seem samey.
Yeah. No. Every fight has felt really different and dynamic, and even like the way in which you're fighting feels very different. You did a really good job pairing the mechanics and the narrative there.
There's so many different moves you can do in this game, but like it would have taken forever to pair the right move with the or you can do what I could have done it as like I just watched yesterday a 20-minute speed run of this game, which is literally insane to think about. Someone beat this game in 20 minutes, and they do a lot of the same moves and just constantly knocking the people down and just beating them on the ground and kicking them on the ground and knocking them, and it's just the same moves over and over again, but done so well. Like it's really still impressive. But if I read it like that, it'd be so lame. Like,
right.
It's really cool to watch. Like, oh my god, I can't believe you took that boss out in like 2 seconds doing what you just did. But like, yeah, you have to make it more gripping. So, yeah. All right, this is it. The sun is coming back up. This is about to be a whole day, and we're going to see the fruit of the students' labor. So we'll see what happens. The morning sun began to pierce through the dark sky as the student sat quietly in his dojo. He was wrestling with what he knew he had to do next. Yang, his father's murderer, was now a profound traditional healer known far and wide. He ran his own clinic, treating others in need. He was once the best pupil under the student's father, but left with his wife and child for a reason the student didn't know. It was after he left that Yang came back and murdered the student's father. The student looked at his hand and noticed how much it had changed in less than a day. He was much older than when he first started on his path to revenge. But he had cut ties with caring for his age before starting down this path. All he wanted was revenge, no matter the price. The student made it to Yang's clinic and entered inside. A martial artist guarded the interior entrance, but greeted the student nicely and kindly before beginning to fight him. The guard stood no chance as the student ventured further inside. It was perplexing to the student. Everyone was so kind to him, though they fought him desperately to stop him from getting to Yang. He found sick individuals learning to become enlightened. As he made it to the other side of the clinic, he finally reached Yang's chambers as he pushed the doors open. He saw him immediately, Yang, as the former pupil stared at a diagram on the wall in front of him.
Time has passed since the days I trained you. We were family. At least that's what I believed.
Yang turned to face the student from behind his desk. He walked over to a small bird cage with a small bird perched inside. Yang opened the cage as the bird jumped into his hand.
But then, During my darkest days, your father revealed his true self. He never cared about us. He cast me out. He abandoned us.
Yang took the small bird in his hand and crushed it.
Tell me, what would you do to save the people you love from the inevitable? Would you cross the line? Break every rule?
Yang and a student moved closer to one another as Yang brought up his hand, still holding the crushed bird.
Wouldn't you challenge death itself?
Yang questioned as a golden light enveloped the bird and brought it back to life as it flew away from Yang's hand.
You want revenge, little brother? Show me.
Both the student and Yang settled into their stances as they stared intensely at one another. The student struck first, throwing everything he engraved into himself over the last 8 years of his training. He struck hard and fast, but it didn't matter. Not against Yang. Yang knew everything the student knew, being a former pupil of the same Sifu. Yang parried everything the student threw. Yang kicked the student backwards as he landed on his back. He stood up, only to be brought back down again. Standing up once more, the student prepared as Yang became annoyed. He increased his ferocity, stepping forward and rushing at the student's legs, tripping him and beating him with his fist. The student lost all of his energy when suddenly it rushed back to him as his body grew older again. Yang watched, knowing exactly what was happening. The student and Yang fought once more, with the former keeping pace. Parrying and dodging, the student was holding his own against Yang. With a strong kick, Yang sent the student flying backwards, through a set of double doors behind him and out into a small courtyard as the rain was falling from the sky. The student stood as Yang walked out.
In the end, you're still the same child I knew, helpless, like the night I killed your father. You're here in front of me only because of this pendant. But what if I take it from you? Will you fear death once again?
Anger boiled inside the student's heart as he replied, "You sound like the frightened one to me." The two fought once more as the rain continued to fall. Yang's strikes were more deadly as the student continued to fall and stand back up. 62 years old, 69 years old, until he reached 75 years old. The student looked entirely different from when he started the day. He knew this was his last chance to kill Yang. Having seen Yang already so many times, the student had learned how to parry and how to read his every move like a book. Yang tried desperately to kill the student as he landed multiple strikes into the old man's chest just before stealing the pendant away. The student, knowing Yang's intentions, allowed his pendant to be stolen as he took Yang's arm and snapped the bone. He twisted Yang around and slammed him into the wall behind him, multiple strikes landing into Yang's chest as the student pulled back his left hand and struck it into Yang's, killing him the same way Yang killed his father. Yang's body fell motionless to the ground as he died. Revenge had finally been achieved, but it didn't feel satisfying. The student stared down at Yang's body as sadness covered his face. As he closed his eyes, he opened them to find himself as a 12-year-old yet again. Before him were two graves, enveloped in red light.
You were supposed to guard the talisman, not steal them.
The voice of Sifu echoed.
It's the only way to save them, Sifu.
A youthful Yang pleaded to his master.
You failed to honor your oath. You are unworthy. Now leave,
the Sifu said with a disappointed tone. The young student felt the sadness from the conversation from the past, as the pendant in his hand began to glow brighter and brighter.
He who has Kung Fu and Wuda makes the other know he can break him. His hands go out like lightning, and the other doesn't want to fight anymore,
the Sifu explained to his son from beyond the grave. The student awoke. Looking around, he realized she was back to his 20-year-old body again as he checked himself over. Unsure of what had happened, the student questioned if his path to revenge had truly occurred. It must have, he thought. But maybe this was a second chance. A chance to be better. All right, so our final discussion, well, before the story's over, I guess, right? So he achieved his revenge,
Right.
but he's realizing there's more. He kills Yang only to close his eyes, open them, and he sees these two graves. One's a little bit bigger than the other one, right?
Yeah.
And they're just enveloped around, and he hears these echoes of the past, right? Yang pleading for help to save someone that he cares about, where Sifu says, no, you never should have known about this. I regret ever training you, right?
Yeah.
There's a lot of sadness here. Mm-hmm. So as he closes his eyes and opens them again, he realizes he's back to the day before he starts his path of revenge, realizing that he's not done the worthy thing of what his father knew he could do. And so now he has a new path to take to achieve Wude. Wude. I made sure I said it right.
Yeah. Interesting.
Well, what are your thoughts, Ryan? So he kills Yang. Are you happy about this? Is this weird? Is it too much?
No, I mean, I think it is certainly weird. I was expecting it to go kind of more abstract, and it did, but not in the way kind of I was expecting. I mean, I think like it was kind of foreshadowed a little bit with the fight with Kuroki, where she says, you don't have to do this. There's another way. This isn't gonna do anything for you. She kind of foreshadowed this whole thing. So as soon as she said that, I kind of thought that maybe something it's gonna go a different way, or he's gonna realize like after he gets his revenge that it doesn't make him feel any better, which is kind of what a lot of these revenge narratives are kind of end up playing out, which I think is a great thing. But it's very interesting to see that Yang, they did a good job, like what's the word? They did a good job kind of making Yang a sympathetic character. He was doing this to save somebody he loved. Like Sifu had this incredible power to, in some way, bring people back to life, and it seems like Yang ended up stealing this in some way, because he brought the bird back, and he has the really incredible traditional healing space. So he kind of stole this kind of healing power in some way. Which Sifu would not give him, but he then took by force. So that there's some sympathy there, where Sifu wouldn't give him the thing that he needed, so Yang had to take it by force. But then the twist of you've did it, you've accomplished this, now start again because you didn't do it right is really interesting. I was not expecting that twist to play out in that way. So it's almost like Sifu from the Beyond the Grave is saying, like, this wasn't the right thing to do. You weren't doing this for the right reasons. Do it again. Almost like this is again another training, right? Another thing, another lesson he has to learn in a really cool and interesting way.
Yeah, and it doesn't play out exactly that way either, I should say. Like, when the game restarts, like, he's bowing again at the shrine, and you kind of go back into it. Yeah. But I want to put more into it.
Yeah.
Right? I want him to wake up and realize, I have the second chance.
Right.
And you kind of see that play out better, as we go on in the story in a second. But yeah, it's very interesting. I love that it gives you this chance to be peaceful.
Yeah.
It's where you could just be super deadly and you're just doing all these things, and he's kind of justified for that, right?
Yeah.
His dad was murdered because of these people and all his friends and all his people around him. So yeah, it's very interesting. I'm very excited to keep going and show you what happens. Like, it's gonna be fun.
Yeah, I'm excited to see it. I'm excited to see where it's gonna go and what different route this is gonna take.
Yeah, it's wild. It's wild. All right, here we go. We're gonna jump right into it.
Yeah.
Setting out to the warehouse, the student moved through the buildings as he had before, but even more quickly, having explored there before. Making it to Fajar, he saw the botanist was still breathing, though the last he saw him was with his head and body detached. The two fought once more as the student easily parried all the botanist's moves. Knowing what came next, Fajar grew his bamboo forest to hide and strike out from, but continued to be beaten by the student. Like it had happened before, the student took Fajar's wrist, twisted it around, and positioned the botanist's machete to his own neck. Fajar waited for death to come as the student let go. Fajar dropped to his knees, questioning why he was still alive. He looked up at the student, who smiled at him as a beautiful light shined from behind him. The student continued his quest, though revenge was not the intention. Shan, Kuroki, and Jinfeng were easily stopped, but their lives spared. All three stunned at the young martial artist, who overpowered them and showed them kindness. The student did not die once in his encounters with his father's murderers, as he too showed kindness towards himself. As he made it to Yang once more, the two fought again. Before, Yang had controlled the fight. This time, he could not keep up with the young 20-year-old. Kicked back out into the rain as he had once before, the student parried more of Yang's moves. He had plenty of chances to kill his father's weakened murderer, but he chose not to. Infuriated, Yang attacked the student again with his multiple strikes to the chest as he grabbed the young man's pendant. The student knew what he had to do as he closed his eyes and accepted Yang's fist. The student fell into the closed doors behind him and onto the ground. Behind the now open doors were the two graves of Yang's wife and child that were now enveloped in a golden light.
No, please, please, stay with me.
Yang remembered his plea to his wife as she passed away. The student stood again. He stayed strong and readied himself as Yang threw the pendant behind him.
Sifu's lineage ends with your death,
Yang promised. Yang jumped forward, his anger leading his fist as every punch and kick was parried. Nothing went through the student's guard as his stance remained strong. With Yang weak, the student connected several fists into him as he brought his left hand back and thrusted it forward, only to not connect. Yang stared in shock and confusion, realizing the student chose to spare him.
This is Wuda,
the student heard his father proudly say to him from beyond. The student smiled as he succumbed to Yang's previous attacks and collapsed to the floor. He closed his eyes, only to open them again to find himself not at Yang's feet, but rather in a beautiful land up in the mountains. The student traveled the sunlit paths to the top of the mountain, which overlooked all. He looked up to the sky and admired the sun as he took a deep breath. Time passed as the dojo was filled again with new students. The Sifu sat at his table, quietly thinking to himself. A student called for Sifu, as the man stood up, leaving what was in his hand on the table next to him. As he walked to help his young student, the pendant glowed on the table. 4 of the 5 charms of the pendant still glowed brightly. The end. So, all right, so let me break it down. It may be a little hard to understand.
Yeah.
It's weird. So the student shows Yang kindness, right? Forgiveness. Because Yang did what he did to get these powers to save the ones that he loved, though he still lost them, right? So he's a vengeful. So his path of revenge led to the Sifu's death, Yang's, which then led to the student have his own path of revenge, but a second chance to do better and show Yang better, right? Yeah. Show Yang how to be better, which ends up costing the student his life. Mm-hmm. He takes that punch, the same punch that Yang killed his father with, he takes too. He continues and still beats Yang, but falls to his death because he allowed himself to take that punch. Mm-hmm. But because he achieved Kung Fu, he achieved Wuda, that he was allowed to transcend, right? He achieved like perfection, and so to speak, and enlightenment, and was able to go to a special land and was be able to come one. And which is so cool, right? Like it's so like that's like that to be enlightened is so like that a lot of people like try to strive for that, right? And so that's what the student does to achieve that. And at the end of the game, you see someone sitting at a table. All you see is his arm, and you don't know who it is, though it's heavily implied it's the student because it still has the beads he has beads on his right arm throughout the whole game, and this person still has those beads, right? And so a young person goes, Sifu, like, come over here, Sifu. So he gets up and starts to walk over, leaving the pendant in his hand behind with 5 charms on it, 4 still glowing. So it's more implied that he came back to life again, that the pendant still somehow saved him.
Yeah.
Though others speculate that this could be Yang. Yang found a new path, right? That the student showed him and then became the new Sifu is one of the other theories.
Yeah. Took his beads and his charm or pendant or something,
Yeah. Like took them as a memento or something, became the new Sifu, given that he also trained under the previous Sifu, So again, gave him a better path. So that's a lot of the speculation. And that is the end of the game. It's really, and that's what's so great about this game. It's a short game, but has so much in it. So diving deeper into context, right? You learn throughout the game, and it's really hard. You can't really put this in the game because you learn more about the antagonist in the game based off things you find in the environment. So, like, for example, Kuroki, you find out, had a twin sister that she ended up killing. Who then she killed her father over because she hated her father, which is why she was exiled from Japan to China, right? And that twist when she changes is her sister, essentially. I don't know if it's actually her sister, but that's what she says. Like she gave you
her sister, created this.
Yes, yeah. And she's like, that's why you should listen to her when she gave you the chance, is implying that this is her sister, rather because they're so different from each other. And you find that out because you get a key from a different stage. Like previously or later on, I guess, that you find to go back and open her room and you see her private study where you see these paintings and you see these things you put together. Like you even at the burning or at the club, during the burning trials, you meet this young engineer person who gives you a USB stick to use to break into Jin Fang's computer at the CEO office, right? So like you do these different things. Like you even find a note in the first level from Yang to Fajar saying something about Fajar's illness that he has and to go get it treated at the clinic, though he's not, or something like that. Yeah. So like these people all have like reasons for what they do. Oh, like, and for example, Sean has a crumpled up picture of his father, right? His a lot of resentment towards his father for how he treated him. So again, like these people have these backstories and like they're there's reasons why they're doing these things. They did it for a better reason than you thought they might have, right? But like so it kind of humanizes everybody in an interesting way. But again, it's something you put together yourself. It's all on the bulletin board. You kind of look at everything and piece it together, and that's why it's so much fun. Like I've been rambling about this game for like 10 minutes now or something like that, and like it's just so good. Yeah. It's so much fun. It's so unique, but it doesn't like jam it down your throat. Right. Like, it's just fun. It's just a good time. So anyway, I won't stop talking. Ryan, what are your thoughts on Sifu?
I think it's really cool. I think like the telling here is really cool, but the game itself sounds really interesting with the set pieces, and there's even, again, I don't know how much of this ending was your dramatization to make it more interesting, but it had this like very like chosen one, the one who would make the right choice and enlighten these people, like this, which again, I haven't seen a lot of kung fu movies, but from like the very few I have, there is like this through line of like this chosen kung fu master who through peace and through kindness is able to kind of spare those around him who would do him harm, and in this really cool and interesting way that ends up telling this really really cool story. I really like the kind of not giving you all the information and letting you put it together piece. There are some games which I played last year that I really enjoyed, but I would have liked if it did. Deathloop comes to mind. Something like this where you had all this information that you put together instead of being told what the story was in a way that is. And I really love that game, but I think that finding the pieces and putting it together is so interesting and engaging that it builds the world. It's that kind of show don't tell mentality, which is really interesting. But overall I thought it was really cool. Like I said, each of the characters seem really interesting. It seems like there's more going on than meets the eye, even when you're playing the experience, which I think is really interesting. These set pieces sound wild. The themes of kung fu and the Eastern mythologies and mindsets seem to be kind of really coming through in an interesting way. And it just is a really cool, again, this like time loop story, which we're seeing a lot of, to tell this really interesting and really cool story. And the thematic pieces of the mechanics of you getting older and stronger but weaker. And then, you know, the Sifu is about your father, but also about Yang, and also about you at the same time. And the Sifu is the teacher, and what you're learning in the end is to kind of let go of that revenge that you feel. Like that is the final lesson the Sifu teaches you in this really cool and interesting way. That makes this really, really nice narrative. So I thought it was really great. I'm really glad you brought it, because this game was not on my radar at all, and it wasn't something that, just because it's not a type of game I'm interested in, but now I'm excited to check it out, or I'm excited to at least know more about it, or if they, you know what I mean? I'm interested in this world and this story because of the little bit that we're able to include here.
Yeah, and honestly, you could watch an hour gameplay of it on YouTube and know the whole story.
Yeah,
like it's very short.
Yeah.
That's what I like about this too. I think you made a really good point about Deathloop, and my thought is, I wonder if they did it differently than Sifu, because it's such a bigger, massive game. They didn't want you to miss anything.
Right.
Compared to Sifu, that could be in an hour. Is my thought. But but again, that's what I love about shorter games. Right?
Yeah.
Is like they're way easier to consume, so to speak, or to get through. But you have more times to go back through. Like, I've played so many of those levels multiple times and got so much from them that I would going to Deathloop, which has much bigger areas to explore. You know, you need different powers to do different things, and it's like, it's great. It's a fun time, but I definitely am not someone who needs to 100%
right
Deathloop.
Yeah.
Whereas, and I'm not usually someone that needs to get trophies, but like Sifu, I'm like actively trying to get the platinum because it's such a more easy one to get. But at the same time, because it's not easy, so to speak, but like it's so much worthy of getting.
Yeah.
So you know what I mean? Like, yeah. But yeah, so it's just really cool. Like, I just love it. And I love how, like, this game, I think the main theme I get from this game, or the plot of the story, is that, you know, nothing worth having is easy.
Yeah.
And it tells you in the story, and it tells you in the gameplay. So, like, gameplay wise, in order to win, like, there's always two stages of a fight, right? You have a health bar and a structure bar. And you whittle the structure bar down the more you punch someone's guard or you parry attacks, right? You can also dodge attacks, but it doesn't really do anything. It kind of helps your structure be okay, so you're not breaking your structure and it's bad for you. In order to kill your bosses, you have to beat their structure down and then do a quick time event. Like you press like O and triangle, I think is what it is. And it breaks into a cutscene where you kill the person. If you want to spare them, you have to break their structure and then walk away and just stand back as they collect. So they're staring at you, right, in the middle of this fight, and they're like just waiting for you to do something, and then they get back up and they get their structure back again, and they fight you still, and you break their structure again, and then you can spare them.
Yeah,
so it's even harder.
Yeah, it's harder to do. Yeah, that's really interesting.
The hard thing to do is never easy.
Yeah.
You know, or the thing worthwhile is never easy to do, and that's what the game proves.
Yeah,
but it's so much more worthwhile. It makes you feel amazing when you spare them, like you got through it, you did it.
Yeah, it kind of there are games that have kind of played with that idea in the past, but didn't lean into it in the way that seems like Sifu did. Like, just thinking of like BioShock, right? You sparing the little sisters doesn't make the game harder, but it should, right? The right thing to do by sparing the little sisters means you're missing out on that Eve. It should make the game harder, and that's the balance, right? It's easier to kill them, and it makes the game easier, but obviously the morality piece there is I wish more games would lean into that. To do the good option, it means you have to do things more difficult. And I guess I understand why they don't want to gate anybody out of something. But with these smaller titles, right, they're not really as worried about that as much. They have that freedom to do more of those things, which is why I think like indie titles oftentimes are able to kind of play around with that more creatively. But I like that a lot. That's such a cool mechanic. And that, again, like you said, ties so well thematically into the narrative.
Yeah, and it just does that. They literally Slowclap did such a great job with this game.
Yeah.
Like, I was very nervous this game was not going to live up to the hype that it was created for, and it did. It did way better than I thought, and I thought it was going to be great already.
Yeah.
So if anyone from Slowclap possibly is hearing this, like, fantastic job. Seriously, like, it's cool. We have some listeners in France, so that'd be sweet.
Yeah,
we actually got someone from Slowclap to listen. But no, I thank you for listening to the story today, Ryan.
It was so good.
I thought you would like it.
Yeah,
and I think that's what's so cool. again, that's what I love about Tales is that like we listen to stories from games that we may not want to play or are interested, but we enjoy the story, right? Like you get something from the story and it's fun. Like it's that's what I love about games is like the stories itself can be amazing. Yeah. Like I'm sure like Horizon Forbidden West is probably the story's probably amazing, and I even Zero Dawn, which I struggled to play, I'm sure the story's amazing, and I gotta give it another chance. Yeah. So no, I love this game. It's my game of the year right now. Yeah. Unless Zelda comes out, or I mean, everyone loves Elden Ring right now, and Elden Ring is the biggest game of the year right now. But for me, Sifu takes it. Yeah. So I don't know. I wish I was an Elden Ring kind of boy. I'm just not.
Yeah, same. We're in this very strange thing where like no one in our friend group is like very into the Souls games. Yeah. So none of us are playing it, but like the rest of the world is losing their minds. So it's an interesting thing.
I bought Sekiro with the intent of beating it and being a proud baby boy, and I think I ended up trading it in for something else.
Right. Yeah.
I wish I did though. It's just I don't know. Maybe I have to watch some Elden Ring games.
Yeah,
I don't know why I got to Elden Ring.
I've heard it's the most accessible. It has fast travel, which they've never had before. So it has like some. It has a map. These are things. Yeah. So I guess it's more accessible. I'm still got a lot of things going on, but maybe. Similar with Cyberpunk in a year when it's on sale.
Yeah.
Which I still haven't touched yet.
So Elden Ring does fast travel. So they're basically Zelda at this point.
Yeah, exactly.
No wonder it's so much better.
I've heard that like it does, and again, this means nothing to people who are here for Sifu talk, but but I have heard from various people on different podcasts in the games industry that it has like it does the thing Breath of the Wild was doing with like go wherever and do whatever. I have no context. I have not seen anything of this game, but it does it in a more interesting way with the combat of Dark Souls or of the combat that is complex and as interesting as those games. So I've heard if you like Breath of the Wild, it's more of that but with better combat. Obviously, like you're missing out on.
Wow.
The art style is totally different and the tone is totally different, but like that level of this game feels really weird and different. Like there is not a quest log. You run into somebody, they tell you to check something out. It's on you to remember where that is and to go check it out. Like there's people who like they have a notebook, their Elden Ring notebook, where they write down who they met and where, so they know to go back. And some people that's really satisfying. Wow. Versus like
good for them.
Horizon Forbidden West has like 40 different categories of side quests you can do. So it's very different experiences.
That's my jam.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm too old to have the time to put all that together.
It all takes too much time. I want more small games.
More small games, please. More Sifus, please.
Yeah,
please.
Yeah, for sure.
But anyway, story goes. We hope you like that story. Again, please let us know what you think. Yeah. Have you reached Kung Fu and Wuda? Let us know how you became enlightened by listening to our stories and sharing your thoughts, feelings, or perspectives to tales on the cartridge at gmail.com. All the E's are 3's. You can also find us on Twitter and Instagram. Let us know what you think. We will be happy to share this on the show. We can also send you a sweet Tales from the Cartridge sticker for doing so. I forgot to mention that part, and I also forgot to mention, if you wouldn't mind, and you do enjoy our stories a whole bunch because we work really hard on them, if you wouldn't mind like giving us a 5-star review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, it would really, 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 or anywhere you listen to us, honestly, but those are the two that I check the most. It would really be helpful, just because it just gives us a lot of energy and gumption and want to keep doing this. Of course, we enjoy doing this for the sake of doing this. Obviously, don't get me wrong, but it's just nice to see it. Yeah, it makes you feel good.
It also pushes it up in the charts, so it gets seen by more folks.
Oh, true.
Yeah. Also good, but also inspires us to want to keep doing it, or not wanting, but like to relights that fire in us to do things more creatively.
Energy.
Because like creative energy is not endless, and when you're drained from work, it's hard to
it's really hard
to channel it. But
I made the most of the script today. I'll be honest with you, I wrote most of the script today.
I have many a times, many Saturday, Sunday mornings, just like sitting down at 5 a.m. and just writing for hours. Yeah.
Yep.
But that's just how it goes.
Same. But it's good though. It's all worth it. Yeah. So hopefully everybody enjoyed it. We've had a huge month already. Yeah. February's a huge month. We've had it's a smaller month, obviously, but we had the most downloads I think this month than maybe ever. I think so. We're doing a good job. I think we're in like, I don't want to say numbers. We shouldn't say numbers, but anyway, it's good. We're doing
good. Yeah. We broke 4,000 downloads.
Yeah.
Powering our way to 5.
Woo.
It's been very good. Yeah.
I forgot to share that. Yeah. But thank you, Storygoers. Everybody that is, whether you're a new listener, old listener, whatever kind of listener you are, thank you so much for listening to us. We appreciate it. Send us those perspectives. We would love to share them. 2 years in, we'd love to share more perspectives.
Yeah, that's a good. Yeah, more engagement as always. Yeah.
Yeah. So, all right. Well, hope you have a good rest of the weekend or whatever day you're at. Hope you got through the day safely, soundly. Go home, relax, listen to us talk about Sifu. Play it while you listen. Who cares? And we will hopefully see you in the next episode.
Bye.
Bye. Kuroki wore a pure white kimono. God. Just wore a giant white car. Kuroki wore a pure white kimono. Kimono, oh my god. Kimono.